Good early AM, 12:35 AM Eastern Standard Time on the East Coast in the United States of America. I'm T-Speaker222 with the ISO headquarters. I wanted to come with you with episode 2. I'll try to keep these shorter, but this is episode 2 of a running ISO dialogue. So this is just to touch base. It's the ISO-20022 newsletter, Financial Industry Value Creation Adopting Common Standards. We read page 1, 2, went through page 1, page 2, and page 3, except for the bottom. So let's go through page 3 and 4 and see where we're at. The bottom of page 3. So consensus decisions, improved management. Because the RMG is a grassroots organization and loosely applies the ISO directives, the RMG organization attempts to arrive at decisions by consensus. In most cases, this works well, but in some instances, a different type of one consideration needs to be applied. In the case of offices elections for the RMG, for example, it was noted during 2007 that a simple voting process fell short of what? Continue page. Bringing ISO payments to the corporate community, a joint effort. During 2009, an unprecedented set of workshops have been held by corporates with their multiple banks to launch the implementation of ISO 20022 payments for their global payment activity. These customers are particularly multi-bank, multi-country, and multi-transaction type customers. The corporate-driven workshops have been held with the goal of ensuring a consistent common implementation of ISO 20022 by the group of primary transaction banks each specific company deals with. Workshop benefits. Two things become clear during the year. First, ISO 20022 adoption by a number of global corporates was underway. Second, banks were participating in multiple workshops. This also brought the banks, many of whose members also participate in the ISO 20022 payment SEG standards evaluation group, and the corporate community together to refine how the messages would be used to make sense in a consolidated effort. The CSTP/ISTH, an original submitter of the customer-to-bank payments messages, discussed the opportunity to coordinate all the players engaged in the ISO 20022 payment landscape for the global corporate community. Although the major ERPs have already built ISO support for SEPA, further work has been needed to support the type of global implementation these represent, extending the support in a common way to, for example, make sense of a global payable scenario. Efforts were initiated to create a common global implementation CGI based on version 3 of the ISO 20022 payment messages for all players participating in the market segment. The common global implementation, which will effectively become a variant of the ISO 20022 payment messages, intends to create common implementation for the credit, debit, status, and account reporting messages, publish the results through the CRG, SWIFT, and the major ERPs for the global corporations building a global payment files using ISO 20022, and develop a comfort level with the EPC that any SEPA transactions contained in the broader payment file from the corporate to the bank will contain the right transaction level content for the banks to create proper SEPA-compliant transactions from the instructions in the multi-payment instrument file for the customer. It is important to understand that the CGI represents one simple implementation of the ISO payment messages. The global corporate market segment is very important to a number of banks. However, these are also implementations that will be appropriate for purely domestic files or files of a single type of instruction. However, the variant implementation should shorten the time and effort required each time a bank implements a global company wishing to use ISO 20022 payment messages. Today, this has been a complex, lengthy task using legacy standards. Agreement on payment messages. During October 2009, SWIFT hosted a workshop that grew from the work of these banks had representatives from 13 banks, SWIFT bankers, associations, major ERP vendors, and 8 global corporates. The goals of this workshop were to create consensus on how the ISO 20022 payment messages will be implemented. In particular, the group has gaining consensus with the corporate reference group of UN/CFAX TBG5. The CRG, which represents about 20 major global corporates and defined the most common use of artifact by corporates, is represented in the payment SCG by the chair of TBG5 of UN/CE FACT. Alongside the banks engaged in this effort have already launched specific meetings with major ERP vendors individually. The early work prepared for the CGI, the initial meeting with major ERP vendors in the workshop recently hosted by the SWIFT puts ISO-20022 messaging while on the road toward an easier implementation. The group hopes that work around the credit transfer, direct debit, and status messages will be completed by year's end. If you guys want me to do page 5, let me know. I'll do page 5 and 6 on the next update, but I want to hear your guys' feedback. Let me know if you like what I'm doing with this ISO head, the newsletter. This is volume 1, issue 2, and I would love to read through this all to you guys so you guys can understand the value creation, adopting, and common standards for the financial industry as we go to adopt the ISO. Make sure to hit the like button, turn that bell notification on, subscribe if you're new or returning. I would really appreciate it.